guys, welcome to SheKnowsArsenal. My name is Jessica. I'm your host. You can follow me on Twitter at JustinoTweets and at SheKnowsArsenal. Welcome to another episode of SheKnowsArsenal Daily. Can you guys hear me and see me okay? Because, I can't hear nothing from my headphones. Not like I need to really hear anything, but I hear nothing. So let me know if on your end you can see me and hear me and all that kind of stuff. Just saying. All right, so on today's SheKnowsArsenal Daily, you guys let me know in the chat if you can hear me. Okay, there you go. It's it was delayed. Okay, you guys can hear me and see me. Okay, great. So on today's SheKnowsArsenal Daily, we're going to be talking about the most recent Arsenal news and transfer news, just going through everything, one by one, incomings and outgoings. What is the rumor? What is the tea? What is out there on the street that we can talk about? And the main headline for today's story or today's show is that Simon Collins put out an article today kind of outlining where Arsenal were in their transfer business. And he also said that it was unlikely that Arsenal would buy a winger and a midfielder. And that's not what I wanted to hear. Because here's the thing. We need both. We need both. I have a sneaky suspicion that we may value a certain position as a priority more than the hierarchy does. And so for that reason, we may end up with the winger and maybe not a midfielder. And I'll tell you kind of why I feel that way. But, I have a community poll going on right now that you can vote on, that I would love for you guys to go vote on, that asks you, if you had to choose, gun to your head. Just imagine I have a gun up to your head and I'm like, this is really serious. We're talking transfer business. And you're like, oh, yeah, exactly. Gun to your head. What are you choosing? A midfielder or a winger? You can only choose. There's no third option. So let me know what you guys are thinking about that. So when I did a poll on Twitter, I'll tell you guys what they think. But don't let their opinions affect how you think. But let me just check it really quick. I honestly think it was heavily in favor of a midfielder. Yeah. So 33% said winger, and this is on Twitter, and 67% said a midfielder. That's pretty serious. That's pretty serious of a gap there. That's 30-70 there, So really, most people would like to see a midfielder come in. And so far, with 40 of you guys voting, yeah, it's the same. It's the same. Now, just before we kind of get into the meat of everything, the reason why I have this feeling that we're not going to go for a midfielder, if we have to choose, we're not going to go for a midfielder, it's going to be the winger instead, is because the order in which the transfer window has gone. We've looked at Rafinha, and that once that went away, we haven't really heard anything else. But when the Rafinha news initially came out, there were some reports, from different journalists saying that we had cooled our interest or something to the effect of, while we're getting these other targets sorted, we've kind of put that on the back burner. Now, anything that's a real priority for you is never on the back burner. You're never cooling it off. You're never doing something different. You're always doing that first, so that's kind of sign number one. And sign number two is, every time we're linked with a midfielder, the links just kind of go cold. And, we went after Rafinha first, and we were willing to put so much money into it that it's okay, well, do we have money for two or just money for one? And, at the beginning of the transfer window, let's just make it let's put it this way. Had our bid went through for Rafinha, we would have gotten him. And let's say we got Lisandro Martinez. they also, not only did they go for a winger and wanted to spend a lot of money on it, but in terms of like the players that we've looked at to back up Tierney slash left side of defense, let's just call it left side of defense. They both could play midfield. They both could play midfield, Zinchenko and Lisandro Martinez. So it just feels like to me that when you bring in Zinchenko, who can play midfield in an 8/10 role, and you bring in Vieira, who can play in the 8/10 role. That's another midfielder. You spent quite a bit of money on it. And then you went after a winger as well for a lot of money. I'm not sure that Tielemans is something that's going to get done if we have to choose between the two, because they were really willing to go out there for a winger. Now, I think over the last couple of weeks, what you've kind of seen is that we haven't had a lot of like concrete links, but there is interest in certain players in those positions. And I'm not going to do them from my understanding, because like I'm not a journalist, but with my Pink Panther detective skills, with my little, thingy, um, what I'm going to say is that like I think when you look at the amount of midfielders that we brought in, and Tielemans not getting done, and how we went after Rafinha, it just doesn't look like it. So for me, it's, I don't know where to go, because it's kind of like I do think that we need the midfielder more than anything, but we have kind of brought in two midfielders. We brought in Zinchenko and we brought in Vieira. And so do Arsenal feel like they're more covered in midfield? Because let's be honest, like Arteta and Adu may really rate Xhaka, even if we don't. So if you look at the numbers that they have there, they feel comfortable with El Neni. They feel comfortable with Sambi Lokonga. They feel really comfortable with Thomas Partey and Granit Xhaka and Odegaard. And they brought in Vieira, and Zinchenko can play in midfield. Maybe they feel like they're fully stocked there with enough quality. Now, we can debate that till the cows come home. But, when you really get down to it, it's like if you look at the midfield, even though I like feel like we're going to be looking at it at some point in the season and saying, why didn't we get another midfielder? But that midfield looks a lot more complete than the attack for me, ultimately. Um, the attack for me lacks goals now with Gabriel Jesus in it. And so if you take Gabriel Jesus out, what happens? Then you have Nketiah, you have Martinelli, and you have Saka. Now, I like all three of those players, and in particular, I love Martinelli and Bukayo Saka, but there's not enough goals in there. There's not enough goals in there, right? And so, and it's just wild because like none of our midfielders score goals, and I know, Martin Odegaard has scored goals, but ultimately our midfield does not score goals. Like even if you put Zinchenko in there, like I'm not sure that he's like a natural goal scorer. I think Vieira might have a little bit of that, but ultimately we have a midfielder or a midfield that doesn't score goals, and we have a front line with some really young kids in it that, as we saw with Martinelli against Crystal Palace, will miss sitters. And it's just one of those where it's kind of like we look a little bit more sparse in those attacking areas than we do in the midfield areas. Depends on where you put it. Emile Smith Rowe, I put him in the attacking areas, but again, he's somebody that's quite inconsistent as well. So you look at the front line, it's like the only consistent performer is Gabriel Jesus, and let's call a spade a spade. He's not about to get 20. He's not going to get 30 goals this season. He might get 15 to 20. So I can see why our Arsenal really tried to go after Rafinha first, made sure that they were going to bring in a left-sided defender that could also play in midfield, because then they can put more money towards another attacker, and that's going to cost a lot. And maybe if they can't get the right type of attacker, because we know if they're not filling that person, or they don't fit the project or whatever, they won't bring them in, which is great. Maybe if they don't find the attacker that they really want and they want to wait until next window, that's when they'll go get Yuri Tielemans. That's when you'll go get Yuri Tielemans. But right now, like Again, and things can change, I think Simon Collins does a really good job, so, the only reason why I'd quote him on this is because he's not somebody that's just gonna make something up. But, it's kinda felt like this for a while that, like, okay, maybe we're not going to get more than one thing, maybe it is one thing, one more signing. Um, it kinda also just kinda depend on what happens with Pepe as well. So things are kinda still up in the air, but ultimately, like I said, I've said many times in this channel, if we don't get the midfielder, I'm gonna be disappointed because for me, that midfield has a very clear ceiling on it. Now, this clear ceiling does not include me ever seeing Vieira play for Arsenal. So that might change if he comes out and he is the left eight and he makes a lot of sense there and he can really improve us. But if he ends up kind of just being an Odegaard understudy, and this is what we're kind of looking at, I just will be a little bit disappointed. And Tielemans is not quite just a 10. Like he can play 10 and 8 and he can play deeper in midfield. And I do think we're missing one quality midfielder in those deep positions. We may not lack in numbers, but we definitely lack in quality. And again, you are a Thomas Partey injury away or absence away from not being able to play at a Champions League level. So, yeah, but I mean, I guess you can say at the same time that you're a Gabriel Jesus injury away from not really having a Champions League level attack. And so that's why it's important to get both. But if you had to choose between the two, I still feel like I would choose the midfielder, knowing that this group doesn't have that as many goals, but also knowing that having a midfielder that can score goals, that will take shots, will actually help that in the end of the day. So, yeah, Righto Boy, thank you so much for your super chat. Says if we are not getting a winger, we have to give Pepe a chance. We have to get a center mid, no excuses. Pepe's had a chance though. I mean, give him a chance how? Like, he's had chances and he has not impressed. And, I get the idea that he needs a couple of 90s, but, you know, I don't know. I think Pepe is done. Like, I don't see how you rehabilitate him. It's hard for me to see him being rehabilitated in the same system with the same manager. But I feel like Pepe, he's had chances and he hasn't impressed. So I don't think there's any scenario where you have just Pepe or Nelson or Marquinhos and we feel like we have enough goals. Like even just without Gabriel Jesus, if you get rid of Saka, what do you have on the right hand side? Like, I mean, I guess you could move Martinelli over there, which we did see. We did see that against what do we see that against? Do we see it against Sevilla? We have seen Arteta tinkering with maybe Martinelli on the right and somebody else on the left. So there is options, but I just feel like that attack is a player short and the midfield is a player short. But in terms of bodies, there's more bodies in midfield than there is in attack. And I just have this weird feeling that they went all out on Rafinha early on in the window because that's where they were willing to spend the most money. They wanted to get Gabriel Jesus. They wanted to get another experienced right-sided attacker. And then it was like, okay, get a left-sided defender that can maybe also do a job in midfield. And that's why we ended up with Zinchenko. So I went after Lissandro Martinez. Um, but I also think that we're looking at something that's going to happen at the very end of the window. This is not something that I feel like tomorrow we're going to wake up and there's going to be some news about a signing. I really do think that until we see some maybe more people move on, I think Arsenal have spoken to enough players now where they probably have a midfielder or two midfield targets, kind of lined up or ready to put bids in. Then they also have like maybe a couple of winger targets that they're ready to put bids in. They've already spoken to agents, they've already spoken to players, they've already kind of set the stage for when these other players leave. And the other players are Ainsley Maitland-Niles, Nelson as well. Bellerin still needs to go. Rinnerson is still kind of there as well to open up more spots for these players and also maybe some wages. But, you know, I still feel like it may just end up being, oh, and Pepe needs to go as well. So that's kind of what's holding everything up. And so this might go all the way down to deadline day, guys. And it wouldn't be a transfer window if Arsenal didn't go down to deadline, right? Tala says just there's not enough qualities in the quality wingers at the moment. I tend to agree with you, Tala. I do think that like when you look at the winger market, I mean, Barcelona were able to secure 2 of the best in one window. They got Rafinha, and then they were able to kind of extend Dembele. I look out there looking over, in the transfer window, and I'm like, "Okay, so what's actually out there?" And basically what it comes down to is, like, players that won't look at Arsenal because oh, why is this still on? Hold on. I'm like, "Why are you on?" Oh, see, that looks so much better now. Um, Sorry guys. But yeah, you're looking at wingers that won't even talk to you because you're not in Champions League, and then you have the guys that are kind of more like projects or players that need some time that you're gonna have to overspend because the market is so dry. And so, you got somebody like Diaby that you can probably start conversations with Leverkusen at about 55 million. That's a lot. For Cody Gakpo, they want 45 million. And I don't know if you guys watched him the other day, but yeah, he looks when he plays against non-Dutch opposition, he you can tell how far away he is. And then you have somebody like Pedro Neto that just assigned a very long contract, so he's going to cost a lot of money. Um, and the options are quite, and then there's the options that like the Dennises and the Harvey Barneses and stuff like that that don't really move the needle so much. So we're in a difficult situation with the wingers, and I think that's why it's been reiterated by multiple sources, not just, it's been Fabrizio Romano as well, like just saying like Arsenal will pursue an attacker or a winger if there's an opportunity. And I think basically what an opportunity means is if we see somebody that's going to actually move the needle that fits the requirements, fits the project and all of that at a fee that feels worth it, that feels like we could do it. Um, they're not going to overpay for anybody. Arsenal are not in the mindset of just buying any old bodies, so I can see them really just picking through and seeing what wingers they're looking at, and we'll talk about them in just a second. And then, if they don't like, what goes on over there, then switching it over to midfield. So, yeah, there's 124 of you guys in here. Like the video, the video, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's go ahead and get into the meat, the potatoes, all that kind of stuff. Actual like the headlines. So, this is coming from Simon Collins says Arteta has said Arsenal are still active in the transfer window if they are to add to the squad. He said from his perspective, he would choose like Tielemans. Leicester are aware that Tielemans has no plans to sign an extension, which basically just puts Leicester in a really bad position. They have got to sell now, and they are open to letting him go for a fee in the region of 25 million. And so a lot of people are like, excuse me, isn't that the fee we've wanted all along? And yeah, it is the fee that we wanted all along, but there have been reporters or different journalists that have said that Leicester started the window wanting 40 million. They wanted 40 million in the beginning, and then it became 30, and now it's 25, which is the fee that we really want. And in the meantime, I also think there was Leicester playing some games, trying to say that he was going to sign a new contract when they know that he wasn't, also saying things like, oh, other teams are really interested in him to try to drum up, maybe a bidding war or something. But Arsenal have gone into this window knowing that they're in a pretty strong position with Yuri Tielemans and that they could wait until the very end. And it looks like Leicester are getting into a position now with the Wesley Fofana saga kind of dragging on a little bit, the James Madison saga. dragging out a little bit. And the thing about those two is I do think that they're gonna see what they're gonna get from Chelsea, see what they're gonna get with Madison, kind of compare notes and see which player they're willing to part with. I think they are less okay. And George, if you're in the chat, George, the Leicester fan, you can let me know if you think something differently or you agree that I think Leicester are more okay with selling Fofana than they are Madison. I don't think they're anywhere near feeling comfortable selling potentially two midfielders in one window, and getting rid of Madison and Tielemans, I think, would cripple their midfield. There's nothing out there on the market that could probably, you know, make up for those 25, 26-year-old Premier League proven, really high quality midfielders. And so I know they're looking at Awar, but Awar has just not been on it. Like, he just hasn't been on it the way that he was before. So with this, Leicester are in a really difficult position, and they do need to go ahead and sell, which does put Arsenal in a strong position as long as nobody else comes in. But, if we were to say, we're not going to bring him in now, we're going to wait, he's not going to be available next summer as a free agent. I do feel like he'll get a lot more interest, especially if he has a much better season than he had the previous season. So if we're going to get him, it has to be now. Like, if we're going to even think about him, it has to be now. And maybe Arsenal are willing to let him go because they maybe didn't want him as much as they thought, but it all goes back to the idea that, like, are Arsenal really so confident with this midfield group? It's I get that the club view Granit Xhaka and Thomas Partey as that starting midfield pivot, but like everybody else in the team, like Bukayo Saka, like Martinelli, like Zinchenko, like Tierney, like Ben White, like all these players, they need competition for their position in order for us to move forward. And what you ideally want is for the new players that come in to become your starters, and your old starters to be fighting to get back into that position. And we don't have that with Thomas Partey or Granit Xhaka. We have players that are either not good enough in quality or too young to compete for those positions. And Tielemans could do that for us and really strengthen our team ahead of what's going to be a really difficult season with everybody improving and more games to play. So the idea that, maybe leaving Tielemans until the January window or, the next summer just would kind of tell to me that they're kind of okay with not getting him. And ultimately, like, maybe he wasn't the number one player that they really wanted this summer. Maybe they feel like they can wait another summer before they address midfield. But every good team addresses midfield first. When they go through a rebuild, they address midfield first. It's the heartbeat of your team. It's the engine room. It's where games are won and lost. And I just look at teams around us that, with another player or so, will have midfields very similar to ours in quality, and that's not to shade Granite, but when you look at it, it's just, I see, like, for years, Leicester had a better midfield than us. Madison, Tielemans, and Ndidi we're light years ahead of anything that we could put together, over the years. And there's teams growing in this league that are getting close to it. They have one or, one and a half really good players in there, and they can make it really difficult for us. So I just feel like Arsenal's midfield needs to go to another level, and that means addressing the pivot. Now, earlier on in the window, I was not like a huge fan of Tielemans in general because he had such a bad season. But, when you really give him, like, the time of day and do your research and stuff like that, he would improve us, especially in the attacking third. But maybe Arsenal feel like, okay, if we make Champions League, then there'll be other players that will be available, so we can maybe just leave this. If you don't improve this midfield, you're not going to make Champions League. And I know that that's a bold statement to make right now, especially not seeing Vieira. But I've seen enough of Odegaard, Xhaka, and Thomas Partey to know that if you just remove Thomas Partey from that equation or Odegaard goes missing, it's a very average situation we have going on in the middle. This is a team that, or a group of players that, although we got the result, you have to say we're pretty poor against Crystal Palace. And there's going to be a lot of Crystal Palaces waiting to beat us up. So for me, like, the midfield has just been such a problem area for so long. This is why, during that January transfer window, I was very upset that we didn't bring in Bruno Guimaraes, you know, and because the reason why I felt more serious about that than I did about Basuma was because I knew Bruno was on the list. They had spoken about him before, that they were interested in signing him, that they were looking at him, and he was on the list. And then when we decided not to go for him in January, then all of a sudden he wasn't a real target and all this nonsense. We decided not to go for him because something happened, probably when we talked to him. Either he wanted high wages or whatever. And I don't care. Like, that guy would have gotten us into the top 4. I don't care. I think we are a midfielder away that is confident, that can, dribble past players, can be press resistant, that can pass through the lines, that will score goals, that will get up the pitch, that can move from left to right and from front to back without, WD-40. A player like that would instantly improve us, and Bruno Guimaraes was that player. I'm not really convinced that Basuma was, but Tielemans is like a less athletic version of Bruno. And so at 25 million, you have to go for it. You have to go for it. I'm sorry. Now, let's see. Let's like, even the other day, like, Ben Jacobs was saying that, Tielemans is still high on the list, but Paqueta is also somebody that Arsenal are looking at. Now, you guys know my theory on this. Again, playing Pink Panther, do-do, 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 do-do. Yep, playing a little bit of Pink Panther. I do think we have interest in Lucas Paqueta. I think the stuff that Edu was saying was absolute nonsense. Either we got shut down by him, or we don't want the information out there that we're interested in Paqueta. Um, like, it's something, because the journalists that were speaking about it were not just in the knows. They were, Goal, Brazil, Risa, like, these people know what they're talking about. There was interest there, and Ben Jacobs kept kind of saying over and over again that I think a lot of Arsenal fans missed, is that Arsenal wanted commitment from Lucas Paqueta, that he was bought in. They wanted him to be bought in. And so the articles or the reports kind of went from, okay, well, Arsenal are set to make a bid and they're really interested in the player. They just want to get total buy-in, to complete silence. And then Adu saying, okay, we don't have any interest in the player. So we might have gotten shut down. And the reason for us maybe getting shut down is that Manchester City are looking at Paqueta when they sell Bernardo Silva. And so I could easily see a scenario where Lucas Paqueta said, you know what, I'm interested, but I know Manchester City may come in for me. I know Tottenham may come in for me. And I want to kind of wait and see if they're going to come in for me before I commit to you guys. And so if that's the case, which is fair enough, because both of those teams do play in Champions League. And if you get a chance to play for Pep, you take it. So I think there was interest there. There's probably still some interest there, but we needed to kind of cool it off because we couldn't get the immediate buy-in. So you have Tielemans and Paqueta as the midfield options. I keep seeing people say Milinkovic-Savic. As far as I'm concerned, he's basically like the Jolly Green Giant. I've never seen him before. He doesn't exist. He just is a part of, like, folklore, because this guy has been linked to the Premier League for so many years, and we've never seen anybody make a substantial bid for him, a real bid, anything like that. You rarely hear any English, journalists speaking about him. And I know he's linked with Manchester United right now, but I have serious doubts of whether Arsenal are actually looking at this player. So I do think that you can all but maybe rule that one out. So at the moment, it just looks like maybe some in the background interest in Lucas Paqueta and some real interest in Yuri Tielemans that will only become truly significant if we cannot get a winger, or we don't get a winger, So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with midfield, and the lack of midfield links just make me think it's not important. You know what I mean? Um, is somebody spamming? Hold on. Oh, you guys don't spam the chat. Don't spam the chat. Okay. Davey says, all right, we hear you. Stop spamming. Neil says, Jess, I agree with you about Paqueta, especially what Adu said. I think he just diverted everyone's attention away from him. He doesn't want to come as there's no Champions League left. I mean, that's the thing. And I'm just I'm just telling you guys what I'm thinking from where I'm sitting at. Cause I'm kind of I know a lot of other people feel this way as well, but I do feel like there's almost a tendency to just believe every single thing that you hear come out of anybody's mouths. And like, I mean, I've seen Pep go up there and say we're not going to sign anybody and then turn right around and they sign two or three more players. I've seen this. I saw Bernardo Silva's agent early on in the window say that he's completely committed to Manchester City and he wasn't even thinking about going anywhere else. Now a couple weeks later, things have changed. So I don't think that these credible journalists are going to come out here and say that we have interest and that we want buy-in, and then 2 weeks later we were never interested and it was just out of nowhere. Ben Jacobs also, reported on it as well, and he said there was a lot of interest in Lucas Paqueta, but we're probably in line in a queue. We're probably in a queue for him, and you don't really want to get embarrassed. The thing about it is that one of the things that you realize in especially in All or Nothing is that the club are very aware of what's going on online. And I think after like Vlahovic, especially, we're trying to keep things more on the hush hush. We probably didn't like what happened with Rafinha as well and all of that information getting out there. So, in order to keep things cool, just in case we are waiting in a queue and we have to see if Manchester City pass him up, if Spurs pass him up, and then maybe he'll come to us, or maybe even Newcastle, we have to maybe fight with them a little bit, then maybe we want to keep it a little bit more quiet. Nobody wants to hear that, like, oh, he didn't want to come or we weren't his first choice because he wants Champions League football. That's not something that Arsenal are gonna want to have out there. And before you guys try to say, oh, they don't care about any of that kind of stuff, they may not let it affect them, because they know what's actually going on and they feel like they're going in the right direction. But Arsenal understand PR and how to keep things quiet for certain reasons. So they spoke about how they, even Josh said, I see all this kind of stuff all the time, stuff that's written online. So they definitely are aware, and I don't think they want that stuff out there, that they're getting rejected, So Godwin says, I feel like Arsenal will get Tielemans. It's just a waiting game to get the price down. As his age, he has resale value and Premier League proven. I hope you're right. Elliot Roberts says, do not understand how Arsenal can consider Xhaka as good enough to take us to a Champions League place. Tielemans, Paqueta at minimum raises the level of the squad that Arsenal desperately need. Exactly. And I do think it's kind of like a dangerous game to be like, well, we think we're going to make Champions League this next season. So let's just, wait because we may be able to get something better next season. I just don't think we have the luxury to do that because our midfield tends to be the reason why we don't qualify or win something, because once Thomas Partey gets injured, it's done. We can't build up through the middle, and we're not the type of team that has the ability to, play long balls and get second balls and all that kind of stuff. So we'd really struggle. And after one or two games, you just can't be playing Granit Xhaka and El Neni anymore. We know Sambi is too far away. So for me, it's just a little bit of like, are we going to keep letting history repeat, or are we going to actually address something that's been really serious for us? And the reason why I understand Vieira is here, but I have a hard time seeing Vieira in that. And I know we play in a midfield three, so don't shoot me. But ultimately, what you do see with Granit Xhaka and Thomas Partey is a sliding eight up and down, and then when we're out of possession, it goes into a pivot. And so that's what I'm talking about, is players that I can see playing in that pivot. And I don't think I see Vieira there just yet. And I don't think I see Zinchenko there either. So it just leaves Granit Xhaka just on his own little island, just feeling good, knowing that no matter what happens, no matter how average he is in the attacking third, no matter how many red cards he gets, he is stepping straight back into that team and starting every single game. And I get that the coaches love him, but I would just like the energy to be the same for Granite that it is for every other player that needs competition. He also needs competition for his spot. Um, Let's see. Clement says Paqueta will go to Manchester City if Bernardo does leave Barcelona. Exactly. Saida says, wouldn't it be wiser for a midfielder that can also play across the front three? So someone like Paqueta. Exactly. And I'm sure that that's why maybe Arsenal have looked at him. It's because he's a midfielder, but he can do a lot more. Like if Gabriel Jesus got injured, I wouldn't feel super panicked if I knew Paqueta was there because he can play false nine and he has done it before at a decent level. He can also play out wide and he can play both eights on either side of the six. So it's somebody that has a lot more flexibility where with Tielemans, you only really get somebody that can play 8 or 10. And I keep seeing people trying to tell me he can play the number 6. I know that I didn't know if I know I didn't believe that, Thomas could do it, but I have huge, questions on whether we want Tielemans as the deepest midfielder in our midfield. Um, let's see. Blue Radial says, Jess, I think Tielemans in. I'd rather get Nelson in the gym and on some kale smoothies so the boy can do a job. Dre the Great says Paqueta or bust. Neil says, um, Mikel, Edu know the squad needs quality, but they don't have a limitless budget, so they must first sell to make space for new targets. We fans just have to chill and wait. Well, that's fair enough, Neil, and I think most of us are just kind of chilling and waiting, but in the meantime, we're going to speculate and chat about it because that's what fans do. We all just kind of like talking about things, and if we only talk about things that we know, we won't be talking about much, right? So for me it's just thinking and having these conversation with you guys and ultimately getting your feedback and your thoughts on like who would you like to see come in. What is your theory on why we haven't gone for Tielemans yet? Do you think we'll get a winger? Do you think we'll get both and stuff like that? Tala says, Jess theory, Elneny and Xhaka will leave next year. I'm sure Arsenal is rearranging their midfield for golden age. We need to make Champions League now. Right now. I hear all the stuff about next year and all the future. And by the time these boys all together, reach prime age, we're going to be ready to go and perfect. But we need to make it now. And I think the current midfield is kind of like a little bit on its day, on a sunny day at the Emirates, not on a Friday and, not like none of the weird times or days, just on a Saturday at 3 p.m., sunny day, Arsenal, that midfield is top 4 quality. But with any sort of like breakdown, any sort of little dent, any sort of little crease, any little tear, you peel that back and it starts looking real different. So I get what you're saying about building for the future, and Elneny and Xhaka may leave next summer. Elneny needs to go next summer for sure. But we need to make Champions League now. And I think just one midfielder won't derail everything. you know Smart Cookie says top 3 are bust, no more delays. Do not waste the tweet says good afternoon, Jess in chat room. Good afternoon to you as well. Kafuso says if Arteta Edu can manage to get Paqueta, I'm really start flexing. Man, I was so excited. Like when we first got linked to him, I was making the little thumbnails and I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be so good. And then it just went dead. And then I realized why it went dead is because Manchester City, Pep had already tapped him up and he was like, actually, I'm going to wait and see if Pep is going to come get me. And then I'll talk to you guys later. And I was like, no, he's gone. Damon says the owners have backed the coach this season. I do believe we will add to the team, but in which area, I don't know. But I do feel like we will add to the attacking third with a winger. Look, here's the thing. If we go in with this midfield, we're just basically hoping that we don't have any long absences or injuries or whatever, and everything just clicks together and is perfect. But with the winger, there's still some options there. And we have been linked with Yeremy Pino, another kind of young up and coming winger that plays for Villarreal. He's 19 years old. I think he has been called up to the Spanish national team. He doesn't necessarily have the numbers that you're probably looking for a wide forward or a winger. But what he does look and comp and statistically look a lot like Martinelli and Bukayo Saka. He's not super like tricky or anything like that, but his runs in behind are quite good. His passing is pretty accurate, and he looks like somebody that could probably get to the next level and really push Saka to the next level. He plays on the right hand side as well. And let me just pull up his FB ref really quick. Okay, I said Pino. Okay, FB ref is doesn't like me right now. There we go. So he's actually right-footed. Um, and he's listed as a midfielder, which is interesting, but he does play either left wing or right wing. 19 years old. Um, yep. And so yeah, and he scored last season. He had 6 goals and 4 assists and 1 goal in the Champions League. But I believe he scored 4 goals in one game. You know, he's basically scored in like 3 games. So, like I said, he doesn't really have the backup, or anything statistically or end product wise that will make you feel really comfortable with him. But, he is a really young player and he has a lot of promise. I tend to like players that have been heavily linked with um with Liverpool. I feel like if you're going in that direction, especially for attackers, you're probably doing the right thing. And so, like, the players that he's most like statistically, the first 3 don't really matter, but Jared Bowen is one and Gabriel Martinelli is the other. So what you can see there is like statistically, he's kind of like those players. And, Martinelli is really pressy and kind of aggressive on the ball. He's not the most technical, but he gets the job done and he's a really like just a really good presser and quite quick. And Yeremy Pino kind of reminds me of Martinelli, um, but also has the Saka part about him, which is like the good passing and that kind of stuff, and the positional, awareness and footballing IQ and that kind of stuff. So, and he doesn't like shirk his defensive duties and all of that. Like he's very responsible. He's not going to be one of those that's like, I'm just an attacker and that's all I do. He's going to do all the other work as well. So, I think he would fit into the group. The most recent kind of um, headlines on him is that there was a report from Jose Luis Lizarraga, and he's supposed to be a reliable journalist. I don't know him, but he said, Arsenal are interested in starting talks to sign the player. Pino's agency has several Premier League stars. Um, you know, Ben Jacobs also kind of backed it up. And let me just make sure there's nothing else here. Um, let's see. Let me just make sure I didn't miss anything. Villarreal expect an offer of 45 million euros, rated Yeremy Pino amid strong interest from English clubs, particularly Arsenal. So that's a little bit of a tidbit. It is understood that La Liga side would be open to accepting a deal worth 45 million euros. So there's something there, but here's another one. I don't know why this is a Netherlands. It seems like Yeremy Pino's future lies in England. Villarreal's only 19-year-old attacker has sparked interest from both Arsenal and Liverpool. So there's stuff there. I kind of tweeted yesterday that I do think we have interest in him. Like I said, I do think that there's a like a list of wingers and midfielders that we have ready to go once players leave. So Yeremy Pino might be one of them. I don't know how high is up on the list, But I would think that, like, we've probably and people get really caught up in, like, "Oh, we put in an offer that's like a bid or whatever." I just think ultimately, like, a dude could go to somebody at Villarreal and say, "Okay, so right now I'm willing to offer 40." And Villarreal say, "Oh, well, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for something a little bit more," or something like that. And that's like an offer, but not like an official bid, whatever. So we may have just did that and never really talked to them or called them back. And Villarreal slash his agent maybe are using that interest from at some point to try to get others to come forward and think that Jeremy Pino is no longer going to be on the market because they use Liverpool and Arsenal, to as the first kind of like links or whatever. And I tend to think that when they put a couple of Premier League teams in a report, it's because they're trying to get people to really look at it. So that's kind of what my theory is on all of this. I could wake up tomorrow and he could be basically an Arsenal player, but I just get this weird feeling that like we're not really ready to pull the trigger yet. Pepe is still here. So we may not be ready to pull the trigger. Maybe we are, but they may be using Arsenal and Liverpool to try to get whatever Premier League team is also interested in him or whatever team to kind of come to the table and put in some sort of bid because every single link is like they'd be willing to they'll entertain offers at this and such and it just doesn't feel like something that we're doing. Kafuso says we got to learn the DM lesson has always been our Achilles heel. So you're talking about um we need to bring in a DM. um let's see, Crispy Rice says if Saka gets injured our options are dismal. Well, that is true, because I do think there's a lot of love for Nelson and a lot of love for Marquinhos, and there is a section of the fan base that are still interested in seeing what Pepe can do. But the drop off between Saka and those players is massive. And so, what that leaves you with is a situation where Arteta doesn't feel comfortable with his other options, and we play Saka into the ground. So, bringing in somebody like Pino could really help. I mean, it would be great if he was left footed as well, but it's kind of like whatever. At this point, we have so many left footers. You could play Vieira up there and play Pino on the left. You could do a bunch of different things. So I don't think it's necessarily like life or death if they're left footed or right footed, as long as they can do similar things to what Saka can do. Um, let's see. Uh, yeah, let's see. John P says Liverpool have a long interest in Pino, which is a good sign. They have good scouts. I mean, I think they have great scouts as well. So that's why I'm kind of saying, like, if they were interested in a player, like they were really interested in Fabio Vieira, they didn't pull the trigger, but they were interested in him as well. And I think, that kind of speaks to what kind of players they might be. Jeremy Pino might have been somebody that they were looking at to potentially, back up Mohamed Salah. So I'm just kind of looking at it like, okay, he probably has some really good talent because I'm not about to sit here and act like I've been watching him forever. I haven't. There's no way you could pay me to watch Emery ball. It's just terrible. It's hard to watch. But from what people have been saying, that he's really talented and he's somebody that is still kind of like a young talent, but could turn into something really, really good. So we'll see um what kind of comes from it or if anything comes from it at all. I'm not sure if it will, but he's probably like the only winger kind of news that's really out there right now because everything has kind of went dark after the Zinchenko thing. Now, just to kind of round this off, we do have to talk about some outgoings. Pablo Marie is officially a Monza player. We haven't announced it yet, but they've already he's already registered as a Serie A player. Now, what's kind of out there and most like everybody's kind of saying the same thing, people are kind of singing from the same hymn sheet, is that it's a loan with an obligation to buy that is only really redeemable if they stay in the Premier League or sorry, stay in Serie A. So if they get relegated, he's coming back home. But if they don't get relegated, then he will be theirs. And there was also a report that came out not too long ago, maybe like an hour before the stream, is that Arsenal actually have to pay 40% of their sell-on fee for Pablo Marie. That just shows how freaking bad this whole deal was. Like, not only are we selling him for like 5 million euros, but 20 or I'm sorry, 2 of that 2 million have to go to them. So we're not going to get anything. And so we basically got a player in, paid him wages that he wasn't worth for 3 years, and then now we're just sending him away for free. But we all I think a lot of us kind of knew when Pablo Marie and Cedric came in that those deals didn't feel right. And so, yeah, glad to see the back of him. Um, so Arsenal are still looking to secure a fee for Bellerin, but that could change later in the window as Betis' financial situation is poor. Yeah, their situation is poor, but at the same time, like I do think we need to try to get something from Bellerin. He's not worth absolutely nothing, and like it's just ridiculous. And I do think we should stand for him because Bellerin, as much as his agent was trying to say he was trying to get us a fee, everything that Bellerin has done has been with an eye towards trying to force a move to Betis. Like he may not have been doing it like the way Aubameyang did it, where he just showed up at Barcelona and said, "I'm staying here." But it's pretty obvious that he did whatever he could to kind of just make sure that that's the move that he got. And we received like other offers from other clubs with fees on it, and he denied those. So the Betis need to give us something. They're not so poor because they were about to buy a war. They wanted to buy a war. I think they may still want to buy a war. So they got some cash, and we need to see some of those coins. So I would just hold off on this. Like I really would. Like it would have to. Uh, I know we may end up just having to go ahead and do it, but I'd rather just make them wait. Maitland-Niles is on his feet, or sorry, Maitland-Niles is on his way out of the club. Might happen late in the window, but there where a club offer a few billion and Arsenal cannot turn it down. It's actually shocking, not shocking, but really like depressing to see how little interest there is in Maitland-Niles. Um, he's one of the last ones out the door, and he probably is one of the ones that you can say probably has he probably has the biggest margin for improvement. Like Pablo Marie is not going to get any better. Bellerin's not going to get any better. Um, there's players that we're getting rid of that don't have like any room to get any better. But Ainsley could still kind of revive himself a little bit. And so nobody's really interested in him. And that's actually like really sad for him. Um, Runnerson's move could potentially be permanent, so we just have to wait that out. I know nobody wants to go back to the Runnerson days. I mean, wow, like that was so bad. Um, let's see. Um, Yeah, those are, like, the main ones. There was, like, a little thingy that came out yesterday about, Lokonga and potentially going to AC Milan, and I was like, "What's going on?" You do not sell Sambi Lokonga because it didn't say whether or not it was permanent or what, but I know AC Milan they're kind of like, "Oh, well, if we can't get rid of Bakayoko, then we won't sign a midfielder." They are looking for a midfielder, and they like Sambi, but Sambi wants to stay at Arsenal and wants to prove himself and is not looking for a move. So even though they like him, I just don't see him going anywhere. People were putting two and two together yesterday and saying that's because we're getting Tonali. That's why we're getting Tonali. We're not getting Tonali. Okay, stop. Stop smoking the hopium. We're not getting him right now. So um Sambi's not going to go anywhere. We've seen enough reports that they're really like happy about him in the more advanced position. They've realized that he's not, a number 6 at the moment. So I'm happy to, see Sambi just continue his Arsenal journey. We don't need to be losing him. But yeah. 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 So, yeah. I like Sambi. Um Let's see. Looking to see what you guys are saying. Um, um, Transfer news says breaking news: Chelsea have confirmed the wages for Frankie De Jong. I mean, it's not even my team, but I'm tired of Frankie De Jong. Just pick somewhere and leave Barca and tell him to cut a check. At this point, like I don't know, Frankie De Jong is so tiring, and it's not even me, so I can imagine being one of the clubs that's interested in him. Learn more says, in case you didn't know, Iran All or Nothing documentary for a few seconds. Congratulations. Yes, I didn't know. I did a show on it earlier today. So yeah. Thank you though. I really enjoyed it. Um, I wasn't like there or anything, but I just enjoyed seeing myself on the screen because I was like, wow, that's crazy. John P says, I feel like not getting Kulisevsky has proven to be a massive mistake. We talked about that earlier. It doesn't look smart, does it? Nah, Blaze says, just as it is true that Manchester City want to buy Tierney. Is it? Is that still out there in the streets? No. Well, let's look at it. I would think after you saw a little bit of that documentary and you've seen him come in after at the end of that Crystal Palace game, we might be thinking a little bit differently about getting rid of Kieran. Um, yeah, I don't see anything about him. I know they were interested at the beginning of the window, but who are we gonna bring in, you know? Um, Kieran Tierney eyed for Manchester City transfer with Celtic in line for a mega sell on Windfall. That looks really old. Oh, major sell on Windfall. That came out 3 minutes ago. Yeah, Kieran Tierney will stay. Why was I like, Kieran Tierney will stay at Arsenal this summer despite reported transfer interest from Premier League champions Manchester City. He ain't going nowhere. He is not going anywhere. And we don't need him to go anywhere as well because, like, come on, like, we don't have enough depth as it is, so, and I love Kieran. Wayne says, Pablo Marie gets disrespected in my opinion. I feel like people just hate on him to that Lukaku performance, which was terrible. But aside from that, I don't really think he's anywhere near as bad as people act like. Well, I think that's what happens when you have players that are just not up to Arsenal standards, is that they tend to get beaten up upon more than they probably should. Like, there's players in our team that are like just Premier League level footballers or lower level, Premier League footballers, but they shouldn't be at Arsenal. We shouldn't they shouldn't be at Arsenal. So when they're there, you tend to just look at them and say you're not up to the standard. And so you say that they're crap and maybe they're just like not as good as we need them to be. That being said, like Pablo Marie looked bad against Antonio on his debut. That was I think right before, things shut down or we played West Ham and we barely beat them 1-0. I remember Lacazette scored and it was him and David Luiz back there, and they were getting absolutely toasted by Mikel Antonio. And you could just see how slow he was, how rash he was, how not good he was. So for me, it didn't have nothing to do with Lukaku. I had already clocked him before that, and it was annoying me so badly that Arteta didn't trust Gabriel more. I know Gabriel has a mistake in him, but I'll take a Gabriel mistake any day before I watch Pablo Escobar do anything for Arsenal. Jesus. So for me, it's like, whatever, man. If you have players that are not up to the standard, they usually get like Cedric is probably a perfectly good lower level Premier League player, but because he's not Arsenal level, we just say he's shit. You know, so I mean, I guess from where we're grading, that's what he looks like. Um, Let's see. Blue Radial says Sambi is one of my sons in it. Oh my gosh. Um, I'm not allowed to say like in it or any of that kind of stuff. Like if like it like obviously watching like Top Boy and like hearing people talk, I'm like, oh, but I was like, I would never say that. I would never say that because I'm not trying to get clowned. Don One says the Cronkies have bought in Tim Lewis. Hopefully our players' contracts will improve. Hopefully. Because that the guy, they forget his name. I'll never forget his name. His name is Husfami. He wrote us it like he wrote them contracts for us and wrote us into a grave. Like it was so bad. Reggie Perry says which part of Italians don't leave Serie A is unclear, but then they'll point you to West Ham and Scamacca. But it's very rare. Blaze says, damn, Jess, let us all dream about Tonali. No, man, he's not coming. Not this summer, at least. Dennis says, I'm tired of hearing that Frankie name now. I'm really tired of it as well. Clement says, breaking news. We are all tired of the Frankie de Jong saga between Barcelona, Chelsea, and Man United. Pick a team already, Frankie. I mean, yes, I just need it to be over. Every day it's something different. And it's like, just be done. you know? John P says City are signing Gomez as a left back, which also kind of shows what our recruitment is like. I mean, we probably just stole a little bit of the technology or the program that they use to look for players. But we were also linked to Sergio Gomez before we signed Zinchenko. So we all either use the same software or our scouts are good too. Who knows? Um, let's see. Elliot Roberts says, "Do you see our match with Leicester as the last audition for Tielemans with the club?" No. But what I'll say is that he'll either have a master class against us and everybody will be having a meltdown saying, "Why is he even with them right now? He should be with us," or he's gonna have the disaster class of his life. There's not gonna be any in between. He's either gonna be so good and playing us off the park, and the first time that he nutmegs Xhaka, it's done. It's finished. Um, Especially if they beat us, 1-0, Tielemans to Vardy or some nonsense like that. But yeah, I expect him to either do that or have a disaster class similar to the one he had against Spurs last season. But do I see it as a tryout or like an audition? No. I think you have your ideas around Yuri Tielemans now. You either really like him and want him at Arsenal or you don't want him at all. And I think it's either like him now or you don't because we've seen enough of him. But again, like I said, if he absolutely smokes our midfield and him and Madison are running rings around us, then yeah, people are going to be very, very angry, especially because there's only going to be like 2 more weeks left of the transfer window. Um, and if he's a disaster, we're all going to say thank you. We needed that. So yeah, but I wouldn't say it's an audition per se. Um, Henke Ho says, if Arsenal doesn't sign players, isn't it like an 8 out of 10 window really good in my opinion? No. No, Henke Ho. Um, if we don't sign any more players, it's like a 6.5 for me. And the reason why is because there were players that are fitting the now that were available that could have helped us get into top 4 and also be able and bringing in Vieira, he's an unknown at the moment. I think he's gonna be amazing, but he's unknown. And we brought in the striker and we brought in a left back, but we haven't addressed midfield. And midfield is something that has been a Achilles heel for Arsenal for a long time. You either needed to get a 8 that could compete with Granit Xhaka and improve us in the attacking third, or you needed to get a Thomas Partey backup. You needed to address one of those. And so absolutely not like that this window would stinky. It would be so stinky because 6.5, that's what it would be to me. Because that's where it's at right now. Like if you brought in just a winger right now, probably say 7, 7.5, something around there. If you brought in a midfielder, I'd probably say like an 8 because I just think it's so important. If you brought in both, I'd be like, "Woo!" Like, really excited. So, yeah, I think it's about a 6.5 right now. I think some people are more satisfied with our squad as is than others, so I'll say that this is a matter of opinion, and if you think it's a 8 out of 10, then you're absolutely right for thinking that because that's your rating. For me, it wouldn't be, that high. Yusuf said, "I'd be happy with one of Tielemans or Paqueta." I would be as well. Manak says, I think we need better Thomas Partey backup instead of an 8 like Tielemans. Yeah, and that just depends on what you think. Again, it's all about opinion. Apparently, I turned into a robot just a couple minutes ago. I'm sorry. I apologize. But yeah, like it depends on what you think. Do you think that Xhaka's maybe limitations in attack are more of an issue than when Thomas Partey goes down and we can't play our game? You know, it just depends on what you think. Do you think that, El Neni can do a job for a significant amount of time? Because I've never known Thomas Partey to get injured and be out one game. He's usually out a couple months, couple weeks minimum. So are you okay with El Neni and Granit Xhaka? I think that backs up your point. Henke Ho says, so we got to have 7 new players in to make it good. It's not about the amount, it's about how many holes did you fill in terms of like importance in that as well. Like we have a hole at right back. That's not as big of a priority as maybe midfield, especially because again, it's not really about the amount of players that you brought in. It's more about the idea that like, okay, what derailed our season? Not having Tierney and not having Thomas Partey. Those 2 things have derailed our seasons twice in a row. So the importance of having another midfielder there, just in case Thomas Partey gets injured, or somebody that can give us more assists and goals in midfield can be the difference between our season being a success or a failure this next season. So it's not about the amount of players, like it's about did we address the biggest priorities? And I think Vieira doesn't necessarily, unless he lights the world alight, which he might. Lights the world alight? S lights the world alight? Sets the world alight. Unless he sets the world alight, um, I don't feel like we've solved that. That's just kinda where I'm at. So it's not about the amount. Um Let's see. Neil says we are an injury away from being derailed again, and that includes our forward line. Yeah, on both lines, like if you were to miss key players, it would be really different. We'd be all shitting it, wouldn't we? Morocco Mole says Xhaka is a bench player. He's not good enough for the first 11 at Arsenal. Yusuf says, Jess, you're such a dweeb. I'm not cool, you guys. Like, I don't pretend to be a cool person or anything like that. I am a nerd. I am a geek. Like, that's, I talk to you guys on a computer and it's the best part of my day. I am a nerd, so yeah, like I know I know I'm not cool. Um, COVID brain, it's real. It's real. You never really get that back. And it's kind of scary, Chris Frazier says we're spot on. We're one Partey injury away from being in big, big trouble. S258 says, I think we will sign more players after we get some players out, do our squad size restrictions, home goal players, etc. And I'm thinking that we will sign at least one more player. I don't think we'll go the rest of the window and not do anything. I just am preparing myself for it being one or the other, and I'm also preparing myself for it to be a deadline day thing, so I'm not setting myself up for constant like, oh, what's going on? Yeah, so we'll see what happens. Hopefully you got a good update in there and enough chit chat, where you feel satisfied for the day. If you guys want to get more of my kind of opinion on what happened in All or Nothing, the 4th, 5th, and 6th episode, that show is also out there as well. You could just go back to the home screen and you'll find it in most recent uploads. I did that earlier, but I really enjoyed talking to you guys again. There's 170 of you guys in here, which is absolutely amazing. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments what you think about my new setup. Earlier, I showed you guys my new setup and some of you guys were like, oh, it looks so much better. I can hear you better and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, yes, I'm doing it. So I actually like the way it looks, a little bit of a blurry background. This is my closet back here. The chair just it's clear. you know, let me know what you think. But yeah, let me know in the comments, how you feeling about it. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with a friend, and I'll see you guys tomorrow where we will do our match preview. Bye.